The crowd held its breath. Lying on the ring floor, gasping for air, was Shane Carter, the star of the football team, the guy who had been laughing at the weakling just minutes ago. And standing over him was Zach Miller, the one everyone had always considered a pathetic loser. No one could believe what had just happened. But the most interesting part was yet to come. Let's go back and figure out how Zach, the one everyone humiliated, became the one who changed the game. When a new student arrived at Riverdale High, he was noticed immediately. Zach Miller was different from the rest. Thin, slightly hunched, with his gaze always lowered and his movements awkward, he looked as if he wasn't even sure he belonged there. His clothes, an old gray sweater, jeans that didn't seem to fit right, and cheap sneakers usually worn by kids from low-income families, instantly marked him as a loser in the eyes of the school's elite. At a school where status meant everything, he became easy prey in an instant. The first to take notice were the guys from the football team, led by Shane Carter. Tall, athletic, confident, he was one of those guys who never had to prove his popularity. One look was enough to let everyone know who was in charge, and when he spotted Zach in the hallway, he immediately knew this was the perfect target for Mockery. "Hey, look at this," he said loudly to his friends as Zach walked by. "Looks like the new kid's lost. This is a school, not a retro clothing club." Zach pretended not to hear. He knew the smartest thing to do was just keep walking. But Shane wasn't about to let the moment pass so easily. "What's wrong? Did your mom buy you that sweater from the kids section?" he added with a smirk, shoving Zach sharply with his shoulder. Zach stumbled slightly but managed to stay on his feet. He didn't look up, didn't respond, didn't stop. He just clenched his teeth and kept moving forward. But silence didn't help. On the contrary, it only encouraged Shane and his friends. To them, Zach wasn't just the new kid. He was the perfect target. He didn't fight back, didn't try to defend himself, which meant they could keep going. The worst part was gym class. In the locker room, the guys made sure to speak louder than necessary. "Careful, guys, our new kid might break." "Miller, are you sure you're in the right place? Maybe you belong in the knitting club." They laughed as Zach changed, making comments about his skinny frame, exchanging glances and smirks. He didn't react. He was used to this kind of thing. But the worst moment came during basketball practice. Zach wasn't an athlete, but at least he tried. When the ball landed in his hands, he took a step forward and raised it for a shot. That's when Shane walked past him. With one swift, effortless motion, he knocked the ball right out of Zach's hands, sending it rolling across the floor. "Miller, maybe you should stick to chess?" Shane sneered, glancing back at his friends. They all burst into laughter. Zach clenched his fists. Not because he wanted to hit Shane. He was just angry. Angry at himself for not being able to say anything. For the way his body tensed with frustration while his mind forced him to stay still. He didn't respond. He just gritted his teeth again and went after the ball. Laughter echoed around him, but no one knew that soon. He would make them all go silent. The teachers saw what was happening, but no one stepped in. It wasn't unusual. There was always someone getting picked on in high school. That's what the adults thought. Someone might make a comment, but never anything serious. And if the victim didn't fight back, there was even less reason to intervene. The other students preferred to stay out of it too. No one wanted to end up in Zach's place. School operated by a simple rule. If you don't want to be a target, don't stand up for others. It was easier to pretend you didn't notice anything. Zach felt this every single day. But among all those who looked away, there was one person who didn't. Lily. She was in a different class, but often crossed paths with Zach in the hallways or the cafeteria. Her long, dark hair was tied in a loose ponytail, and her voice carried no mockery, only calmness and understanding. "Just ignore them," she said one day when she saw Zach sitting alone at a corner table, absent-mindedly poking at his half-eaten lunch with a fork. He looked up at her. "Easier said than done," he muttered. She sighed and sat down across from him without waiting for an invitation. "They're like dogs. If you don't react, they'll lose interest eventually." Zach wasn't a coward. He could stand up for himself, but that wasn't the issue. One person couldn't win against a crowd. And was that even the point? Was he supposed to fight every single one of them just for laughing behind his back? It would be pointless, so he stayed silent. But no one knew one thing about him. Zach had been practicing martial arts since childhood. His father, a former Marine, always told him, "Son, a true fighter isn't the one who throws punches, but the one who controls himself." Training wasn't just a sport for him, it was his philosophy. He had learned to endure, to take hits, to understand when to fight and when to walk away. But even ironclad patience can crack. That day, something changed. After class, when the hallways had begun to empty, Shane and his friends found another excuse to entertain themselves. It started as always, a slight shove, laughter behind his back, and then, suddenly, a well-timed trip. Zach didn't have time to react. He hit the hard floor heavily, his elbow slamming against the edge of a locker. "Oh, Miller, why are you so clumsy?" Shane sneered, looking down at him. Zach clenched his teeth. Laughter echoed around him again. Lily stood nearby. She was one of the few who wasn't laughing. When she saw him fall, her face tensed and she took a step forward, about to help him up. But Zach got up on his own. Something in his eyes had changed. Until that moment, he had endured. He had thought it was the right thing to do, that staying silent was the better choice, but he didn't want to endure anymore. The next day, there was a boxing training session at school. It wasn't just an extracurricular activity, it was part of the football team's conditioning. The coach believed that boxing sparring helped develop endurance and reaction time, so he held these sessions once a month. Technically, anyone could participate, but usually only athletes showed up, those who were used to fighting and weren't afraid to take a hit. When Zach walked into the gym, the air instantly grew tense. All heads turned. "You?" Shane's voice cut through the silence. "Miller, what is this? You trying to play Rocky?" Laughter rippled through the room, that kind of laughter that left no doubt. "You don't belong here. You're out of place." But Zach didn't react. He confidently walked up to the ring and climbed in without a word. The coach narrowed his eyes at him. He knew who this kid was. He had seen how the others treated him. Deep down, he respected those who had the guts to step up, but he still couldn't help but wonder, why is he here? He doesn't know what he's doing. "You sure about this, kid?" he asked. Zach just nodded. Shane smirked and climbed into the ring, adjusting his gloves. He felt like a predator about to toy with his prey. "Fine, but don't start crying when I knock you out," he sneered. A crowd of players and classmates gathered around, some pulling out their phones. Everyone was sure this fight would be over in seconds. Miller won't last more than 30. The bell rang. Shane moved first. Fast, aggressive, just as expected from a football player. Strong swings, overpowering energy. But Zach dodged. He slipped out of the way at the last second, like the wind passing by. Shane didn't even realize his punch had missed. He swung again. Nothing. "What the?" someone murmured in the crowd. Shane gritted his teeth in frustration and lunged forward, trying to push Zach into the ropes. But instead, he suddenly felt a sharp, precise impact to his side. Zach had struck, lightning fast. No wasted movement, just pure calculation. His foot connected with Shane's ribs, sending him stumbling backward. The gym went silent. "What?" someone whispered. Shane coughed, his hand instinctively going to his side. This wasn't an accident. That kick was deliberate, precise. And for the first time in his entire school life, he felt something new. Fear. Shane's face twisted in anger. He charged again, wild and reckless. He didn't care about technique anymore. He just wanted to hit this scrawny little upstart. But Zach moved differently. Light, calm, focused. Shane threw a punch. Zach sidestepped. Shane feinted. Zach had already anticipated it. And then, Shane lunged again, putting everything into his attack, only to feel his legs being swept out from under him. Zach had moved in an instant, grabbing and pulling, forcing Shane's body to lose control. Before Shane even realized what had happened, he was airborne. The room fell completely silent as everyone watched him go down. A dull thud echoed as he hit the mat. Shane lay flat on his back, staring at the ceiling in shock. Zach stood over him, not even breathing hard. His gaze was cold, his body relaxed, as if the fight had barely required any effort. The coach blinked. The crowd froze. Silence. Total. Absolute. Silence. The gym was dead silent. Not a single word. Not a single laugh. Only Shane's heavy breathing filled the air as he lay on his back, staring at the ceiling, as if trying to process what had just happened. How? How is this even possible? He, the star of the football team, the leader of the school, the one used to being on top, was on the floor. In front of everyone, and not because of some lucky hit, not because of a fluke. He lost. Lost to the one he had called weak. Lost to the one he had humiliated. Slowly, Shane turned his head. Zach stood next to him, looking down with calm, steady eyes. There was no gloating, no arrogance, just quiet, unwavering confidence. Zach leaned down and offered his hand. "Never judge by appearances," he said simply. Shane clenched his teeth. His fingers twitched. Every instinct screamed, "Don't take it! Get up on your own!" But something inside him cracked. He looked away, swallowed his pride, and took the hand. Zach pulled him up effortlessly. The gym erupted. At first, a whisper. Then, someone clapped. Then another. And within seconds, the whole room exploded in applause. Shane felt his face burn. This wasn't a moment of support. This was the moment everyone realized. The power dynamic had changed. Even the coach, who had doubted Zach until the very last moment, gave him a silent nod of respect. The next day, everything was different. Zach didn't hear whispers behind his back anymore. No one tripped him in the hallways. No one threw mocking comments his way. The same people who had laughed at him yesterday now looked at him with silent respect. Some even gave him small, subtle nods as they passed, as if an invisible bond had formed between them. Shane never spoke to him after the fight, but he didn't smirk, didn't throw out snide remarks. He just walked past with a blank expression, avoiding Zach's gaze. Zach was no longer the scrawny loser. He wasn't weak. Now he was the one who had proved himself. And the most important part? He didn't do it with rage or hatred. He did it with skill, control, and self-respect. "You were incredible," a voice said behind him. Zach turned. Lily. She stood with her arms crossed, a small smile on her lips. Her eyes weren't filled with surprise, only pride, like she had known all along what he was capable of. Zach didn't say anything. He just smiled. He didn't need to prove anything anymore. Everyone already knew.